What if the biggest prison in your life isn't your past, your circumstances, or your fears, but your desperate need to be liked? Today, we are unraveling the deeply uncomfortable truth hidden inside The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga.
Listen, we're not doing a typical self-help summary today. No, this is an exploration of human nature. It's about how the pursuit of validation secretly, quietly, controls almost everything we do.
Section 1. The Invisible Prison. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever felt like you're constantly performing? Like your whole life is this carefully curated exhibit designed entirely for the approval of your parents, your boss, your friends, or, let's be real, even random strangers on the internet?
Really think about this for a second. Whose life are you actually living? Because when our ultimate driving goal is to simply not be disliked by anyone, we slowly hand over the pen that writes our own story.
Think back on your major life choices. How many of those decisions, the career you picked, the relationships you stayed in way too long, the clothes you wear, or what you post online, how many were made just to avoid disappointing someone else? When you live to satisfy everyone else's expectations, you literally trap yourself in a maze where the walls are made entirely of other people's opinions.
And what would you do differently right now if you weren't afraid of being judged? Think about it. To never be disliked, you essentially have to swear loyalty to 10 different masters. You're constantly gauging everyone's feelings, twisting your own personality just to avoid a little conflict. It is absolutely exhausting. But why do we stay in this prison?
Section 2. The Myth of the Past. To understand why we stay locked in, we have to look at the inciting incident of this whole philosophy. We need to talk about Alfred Adler. He was an absolute giant of 20th century psychology, working right alongside Sigmund Freud, but he came to a radically different and honestly highly controversial conclusion about human behavior.
You see, there's a profound split in how we view our own pain. Freud believed in etiology, the idea that our present is strictly driven by past causes. If you experience something terrible, well, that trauma dictates your current behavior. But Adler championed teleology. He argued that we actually aren't driven by the past at all. Instead, we're moving toward future goals. He suggested that we fabricate our present emotions, even intense ones like anger or fear, as tools to achieve a present goal.
And this brings us to a deeply challenging concept. In Adler's framework, trauma doesn't permanently define us. Instead, he controversially posited that we often use past experiences as an excuse to avoid the pain of change. There's this powerful example in the source material. A young woman who suffers from a terrible fear of blushing around people. She's convinced this fear prevents her from asking out the boy she likes. But Adlerian psychology completely flips this. It suggests she unconsciously created the fear of blushing as an excuse. Her real goal is to avoid the devastating pain of potential rejection. By having this blushing problem, she can safely tell herself, "Oh, he'd totally date me if only I didn't blush," fully protecting her ego from failure.
Part 3. The Separation of Tasks. So if we can accept that our past doesn't strictly dictate our future, how do we begin to pick the lock of this people-pleasing prison? How do we stop obsessing over what others think?
Well, the absolutely crucial point is mastering what Adler called the separation of tasks. This is the ultimate boundary between what you can actually control, meaning your own actions and choices, and what you absolutely cannot control, which is other people's reactions and judgments. Pretty much all of our interpersonal misery comes from intruding on other people's tasks or letting them intrude on ours.
It basically boils down to that classic proverb. The authors share a story of a philosopher trying to rebuild a relationship with an abusive father. For years, he thought the past prevented their reconciliation. But then he realized that extending an olive branch, leading the horse to water, well, that was his task. Whether his father chose to forgive, change, or, drink the water, that was his father's task. If someone dislikes you for living your authentic life, that is their task, not yours.
Section 4. The Cost of Freedom. Now, understanding this logically and actually living it are two very different things. To step out of that invisible prison, you have to pay a very specific price.
Just look at how we structure our lives. Most of us operate in what Adler calls vertical relationships. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, desperately looking for praise from superiors, or maybe even looking down on those below us. It's a hierarchy completely built on competition and this intense fear of falling behind. Adler argues we have to dismantle this. We need to build horizontal relationships. We have to view everyone as equal comrades. Because when you stop competing, you stop needing to prove your worth to the people above you. You literally no longer need their praise to feel valuable.
Which leads us to the ultimate revelation of this entire philosophy. Freedom is not the absence of judgment. No, real freedom actually means being disliked by other people. If you aren't being disliked by someone, somewhere, you're still molding yourself to the expectations of others. Disapproval isn't a failure. It is the absolute proof that you are finally exercising your freedom and living authentically.
Part 5. Happiness is contribution. So, once you accept that being disliked is just a natural byproduct of freedom, a massive void opens up. If you aren't constantly chasing validation and praise anymore, what exactly are you supposed to chase? What brings genuine happiness?
Well, Adler gives us a surprisingly actionable formula to shift from external validation to internal meaning. It takes 3 steps. First, self-acceptance. Now, this isn't blind self-esteem. It's accepting exactly who you are right now, flaws and all, while knowing you have the power to change. Second, unconditional confidence in others. This means seeing people as your comrades in a horizontal relationship, not as rivals just waiting for you to fail. And third, contribution to others.
Because here is the really profound truth. Happiness doesn't require someone else to give you a medal or shower you with praise or like your photo. True happiness simply comes from your own internal, quiet recognition that you are of use to your community. As long as you feel you are contributing, you have value. You honestly don't need anyone's permission to be happy anymore.
Section 6. Dancing in the present. This entire mindset completely dismantles the heavy anxiety we carry about where our lives are heading and what people will think of us when we finally get there.
Let's see how this builds our final understanding of life itself. We are always taught to view life as a continuous line, an exhausting, stressful climb towards some final summit of success or ultimate approval. But Adler says life is actually just a series of dots. It's a dance made up of individual, disconnected moments happening right now. There's no predetermined destination. The goal of dancing isn't to arrive at a specific spot on the floor. The goal is simply the dance itself.
Imagine you're standing on a dark stage. If the lights are dim, you can sort of see the ghosts of your past, and you can anxiously peer into the dark unknown of your future. But if you shine a brilliant, blinding spotlight directly on yourself, right here, right now, the past and the future completely vanish into the darkness. You can only see this exact moment. When you separate your tasks, accept yourself, and contribute to others, you are standing fully in that light.
Which leaves us with one final undeniable question. If you stopped living for other people's approval today, what kind of life would you finally begin to live? If this explainer challenged the way you see yourself and the world around you, don't forget to like the explainer, subscribe to be on the pages, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because sometimes the right idea at the right moment can change an entire life.